We're continuing to see an increase in the number of cyber attacks. 2017 saw one of the largest attacks so far, which was the Equifax breach. We also saw the WannaCry and Petya and NotPetya ransomware taking full effect. As a result, we're also seeing a much higher focus on compliance when it comes to cyber. We're also seeing added complication with the uptake of the Internet of Things and with more and more employers and employees wanting to bring their own devices into the organisation. It's adding to the complexity of an organisation, which is requiring us to have stronger compliance frameworks.
Compliance is a really complex area. So what we're hearing from customers is they're not quite sure whether things like GDPR apply to them, and they're also unsure about some of the changes to the Privacy Act and when they should be reporting on data breaches and what level of information they should be sharing with their customers. And one of the areas that is a great place to start when looking at tackling this subject, firstly, it's to seek advice from your legal representatives within your organisation and your compliance officers to make sure that you're sort of across the latest legislation and how it applies to your organisation.
When an organisation is considering the General Data Protection Regulation requirements, they shouldn't do this in isolation. They should also be considering this in conjunction with the changes to the Privacy Act. And the reason being is that although they both have different reporting structures and they do cover different things such as the right to be forgotten, they do have some similarities. For instance, you have 30 days to report whether or not you suspect that you've been subject to a breach under the mandatory data breach requirements. However, under GDPR, you have only 3 days. So therefore, it makes more sense to be looking at the more restrictive requirements and ensuring that you meet these, and you'll therefore meet both requirements. One of the areas a lot of companies don't consider when they're looking at their compliance obligations is third parties or vendors that they're utilising to process data. Quite often these smaller organisations that are providing services to larger enterprises are not aware of their requirements under the regulations, and the organisations leveraging them aren't aware that they need to ensure that these companies are actually compliant, and that's often where we see the data breaches.
So we would definitely recommend, where customers don't fully understand where their customer data is stored, is that they get a trusted third party in to help them do an assessment and an audit around that customer data so they can start building a picture of where that's stored. Telstra has a large multidisciplinary team of experienced security consultants, and they deal with this legislation on a global basis but also on a local basis in Australia. So they can bring that experience together for our customers and help them understand legislation that applies to them and how best to build a framework to manage that.